Actually, I'd like to see the gold pieces.
Gold simply doesn't suit dark skin. Silver or bronze would be more suitable.
He said gold doesn't suit dark skin.
What? Who said that?
For 3 months, Ava Reynolds lived on numbers. Numbers on invoices. Numbers on freelance translation contracts. Numbers on her savings app that she checked every night before sleeping. She worked extra translation jobs after her regular office hours. Legal documents, medical reports, immigration papers. Long pages filled with complicated words that had to be exact. A single wrong phrase could change someone's life. So she stayed up late, reading carefully, typing carefully, double-checking everything. Her eyes often burned by midnight. On weekends, while others rested, Ava sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of cheap coffee that had gone cold long before she noticed. She translated contracts in silence while the city outside laughed, celebrated, and spent money she refused to touch. She skipped small pleasures first. Then she skipped lunches. Twice a week, she packed simple crackers and fruit instead of buying meals with coworkers. When they invited her out, she smiled and said she was busy. The truth was simple. Every dollar mattered. Because this was not just a bracelet. It was proof. Proof that she could give something beautiful. Proof that she could choose beauty for herself. Proof that she belonged in places where price tags had more zeros than most people saw in a year. The man she wanted to buy it for had seen her in ways no one else had. Not just her degrees. Not just her strength. But the quiet parts. The tired parts. The parts she kept guarded. For the first time in her 28 years, she felt chosen, not tolerated. So she saved. 3 full months. When the balance finally reached the number she needed, she stared at the screen for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something close to pride. That afternoon, she stood outside a building on Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue did not whisper wealth. It declared it. The sidewalks were polished clean. Windows stretched high and wide, displaying watches that could pay for houses, handbags that cost more than college tuition, and jewelry that glowed under soft lights like captured sunlight. The air even felt expensive. Cars slid past without noise. Men in tailored suits walked with quiet confidence. Women stepped out of black sedans wearing heels that made no apology for their price. At the corner stood Harrington and Ayres. The boutique had been there for nearly a century. The gold lettering on the window shimmered with old prestige. Inside, through the glass, Ava could see marble floors, velvet-lined cases, and soft golden lighting that made every display sparkle like a secret. She adjusted her coat, took a breath, and stepped inside. The bell above the door rang with a delicate, musical sound. It was soft, polite, refined. The air inside carried the scent of leather-bound catalogs and cedarwood polish. The silence felt heavy, like it expected perfection from anyone who entered. Behind a glass display case stood Charles Harrington IV. He was polishing a watch when he looked up. It took him less than 2 seconds. 2 seconds for his eyes to scan her coat, her hair, her skin. Ava recognized the look. She had seen it since she was 10 years old. The quiet calculation. The silent question. Does she belong here? The professional smile forming on his lips faltered. It didn't disappear completely. It froze.
May I help you?
May I help you? He asked. The words were correct. The temperature behind them was not. Yes, Ava replied calmly. I'm looking for something in gold. A men's bracelet. Something elegant. Harrington moved slowly around the counter, not toward the central displays glowing with yellow light. Instead, he drifted toward a section near the back, close to cleaning supplies and pieces that clearly hadn't sold in years. We have some lovely silver options here, he said. Budget is always an important consideration. The sentence landed gently, but it hit hard. Ava felt heat rise slowly up her neck. That familiar burn. She had trained herself not to react too quickly, to remain composed, to remain professional. Actually, she said evenly, I'd like to see the gold pieces. Harrington stopped. He turned toward her fully this time. The smile changed. It softened into something that pretended kindness, but carried quiet superiority. My dear, he began, leaning slightly closer as if sharing wisdom, it's part of my job to guide clients properly. Ava held his
I'd like to
gaze.
see the gold pieces.
Gold simply doesn't
Gold
suit
simply
dark
doesn't
skin,
suit dark
he
skin.
said gently.
Silver or bronze would
It's a
be
matter
more
of
suitable.
contrast. Silver, bronze, even steel are far more flattering choices for your complexion. The world seemed to slow. She had heard similar things before. In classrooms, in meetings, in polite suggestions wrapped in fake concern, but never this directly, never dressed as professional advice. Perhaps, Harrington continued smoothly, the jewelry store on the main street might be more suitable. Translation: you don't belong here. Ava felt the humiliation rise like heat under her skin. Rage pressed against her ribs, but her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Dignity first. Always dignity. She swallowed the anger, compressed it into something small and controlled, lifted her chin. "I'm here," she said carefully, "to buy gold." The air in the boutique stilled, and the tension froze between them like glass about to crack. The door opened again. The bell above it rang once more, but this time the sound did not feel delicate. It felt sharp, clear, final. The silence inside Harrington and Ayers shifted. It was no longer the polished, expensive silence of luxury. It became something heavier, something charged. Ava did not turn immediately. She felt it first. A change in the air, a subtle tightening in the room, as if the walls themselves had straightened. Charles Harrington looked toward the entrance, and went still. Jae-hyun Park stood in the doorway. He did not rush in. He did not need to. He filled the space without effort. His dark hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. His suit was deep charcoal, tailored so precisely it looked sculpted onto his body. The fabric caught the light softly. Anyone who understood fashion would recognize it instantly. At least $15,000, custom-stitched. The cuff of his sleeve lifted slightly as he adjusted it. A watch gleamed beneath. Emerald accents. Heavy. Refined. Worth more than most people's yearly salary. The glass window reflected 3 men in black suits standing outside on Fifth Avenue. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply waited. Security. The boutique atmosphere changed completely. The air no longer felt controlled by Harrington. It felt owned. Jae-hyun stepped inside. The bell stopped ringing. "Ava." He said her name softly. Not loudly. Not urgently. But it
Ava.
carried across the room like a quiet
What
command.
happened?
Ava
Nothing.
turned.
I was just.
For a
Don't lie to
second,
me.
relief flickered in her eyes. Then she quickly composed herself. She had spent her whole life learning how to hold herself together in uncomfortable spaces. Jae-hyun's gaze moved from her face to Harrington, then back to her. He sensed it immediately. Something was wrong. Harrington swallowed. His throat felt dry. His mind raced faster than he could control. He recognized power when he saw it. Real power. Not inherited prestige. Not old family name. Something sharper. Something active. He noticed the suit. The watch. The posture. He noticed the security outside. His heartbeat began to pound in his ears. Jae-hyun walked forward slowly. Each step sounded measured against the marble floor. He stopped in front of Ava. Up close, the tattoos along his neck were visible beneath the collar of his suit. A tiger-frozen midleap curved along one side, muscles tense, eyes focused. On the other side, a dragon coiled upward, detailed scales catching the light as if alive. They were not decorative. They were deliberate. He lifted his hand gently and touched Ava's cheek. The contrast between his strong, tattooed fingers and the softness of the gesture made Harrington's stomach twist. "What happened?"
Ava.
Jae-hyun asked quietly.
What happened?
Ava hesitated.
Nothing. I was
She
just.
forced a
Don't
small
lie to me.
smile. "Nothing. I was just. Don't lie to me." His voice was still calm, but it left no room for comfort. It was not anger. It was certainty. Ava's shoulders dropped slightly. The strength she used to stand tall in front of strangers softened in front of him. She took a breath. "He said," she began carefully, "that
He
gold
said
doesn't
gold
suit
doesn't
dark
suit
skin."
dark skin.
The words hung
What?
in the air.
Who said
Harrington
that?
felt them hit the room again, this time louder. Jae-hyun's face did not explode with rage. It changed in a different way. His jaw tightened just slightly. His eyes sharpened. The warmth that had been there seconds ago faded into something colder. Not emotional. Strategic. He removed his hand from Ava's cheek and turned slowly toward Harrington. The boutique suddenly felt too small. Harrington forced a weak smile. "Sir, I believe there has been a misunderstanding," he began quickly. "I was simply offering professional advice. It's part of luxury consulting to ensure that clients make suitable choices." His voice trembled despite his effort to steady it. Jae-hyun studied him without blinking. "Professional," he repeated. He said the word as if examining a cracked piece of glass. Harrington nodded too fast. "Yes, of course. Purely professional." Jae-hyun's eyes did not soften. They became still. Not emotional. Not loud. Still. The tiger and dragon along his neck seemed almost alive under the boutique lighting. The silence returned, but it was no longer elegant. It was sharp, and heavy, and waiting. The tension crystallized between the three of them, solid and unmovable, as if the room itself understood that something irreversible had just begun. Jae-hyun did not raise his voice. He did not step closer. He simply looked at Charles Harrington and said calmly, "Show me the vault." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Harrington blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The vault," Jae-hyun repeated. "Where you keep your most valuable pieces." Harrington hesitated. For decades, that vault had been private, exclusive, reserved for collectors with old family names and older money. It was not something shown on impulse. His eyes moved quickly to Ava, then back to Jae-hyun. "I'm not sure that would be necessary," Harrington said weakly. Jae-hyun slipped his hand into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. When he pulled it out, a black card rested between his fingers. American Express Centurion. The card did not shine. It did not sparkle. It simply existed, heavy, matte, absolute. Harrington's breath caught. That card did not belong to people who asked about price tags. It belonged to people who decided outcomes. "Vault," Jae-hyun said again. Harrington swallowed hard and turned toward the back of the boutique. His polished shoes felt heavier with each step. His hands trembled as he approached a concealed steel door behind a velvet curtain. He entered the security code. Once. Error. He wiped his palms against his trousers and tried again. Error. On the third attempt, the keypad beeped in acceptance. The steel door swung open slowly. Inside, the lighting was softer but brighter at the same time. Each shelf was lined with black velvet. Each display glowed under precise white beams. Gold shimmered. 24-karat bracelets rested in neat rows, thick and heavy, glowing like captured sunlight. White gold diamond necklaces lay coiled in elegant curves, each stone catching light and breaking it into sharp brilliance. Sapphire rings gleamed in deep blue settings, cool and royal. An emerald watch sat alone in a glass case, its face surrounded by green stones, so rich they seemed almost liquid. Antique tiaras rested on velvet stands, delicate and historic, once worn at galas and weddings of families whose names appeared in society columns for generations. Rubies burned red under the lights, bold and unapologetic. Every piece carried a tag with numbers that reached 5 or 6 digits. The inventory exceeded $4 million. Jae-hyun stood in the doorway and looked once. Then he said, "All of it." Harrington froze. I'm sorry?" "All of it," Jae-hyun repeated. "Pack everything." Harrington's face drained of color. "That inventory is worth over $4 million. Jae-hyun walked back toward the main counter and placed the black Centurion card down with a quiet, solid click. "I'm aware." The sound echoed in the boutique. Harrington's pulse pounded in his temples. Jae-hyun pulled out his phone. He dialed a number and waited only a second. "Sung-woo," he said calmly. "I'm at Harrington and Ayers on 5th Avenue. Bring the lawyers. And the acquisition team." Harrington's knees weakened slightly. "I'm purchasing the inventory," Jae-hyun continued. "And the building." Harrington stared at him in disbelief. "The building isn't for sale." Jae-hyun's eyes remained steady. "Everything is for sale." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I did some research," he added evenly. "Your landlord is facing financial pressure. 3 months behind on obligations. He'll accept the offer." Harrington felt the ground shift beneath him. "This boutique," he whispered, his voice breaking, "is my grandfather's legacy. 90 years of history. We have served this avenue with prestige and refinement." His composure cracked. "This is my family's name." Jae-hyun looked at him without sympathy. "You used that legacy," he said quietly, "to humiliate Ava." The words were not emotional. They were final. Harrington's shoulders collapsed inward, as if something inside him had snapped. His breathing became uneven. His hands shook openly now. The polished confidence he had worn like armor since Ava walked in dissolved completely. He was no longer standing tall behind a counter of heritage. He was standing in front of consequences. And he was losing control. The silence stretched too long. Charles Harrington felt something inside him break. His legs gave way. He dropped to his knees on the polished marble floor. The movement was not dramatic. It was not planned. It was the collapse of a man watching everything he believed stable dissolve in front of him. "Please," he said, his voice thin and shaking. "I made a mistake." His hands pressed against the floor for balance. "A terrible mistake," he continued quickly. I spoke carelessly. I didn't mean to offend. His polished composure was gone. The confidence he carried behind the glass counter had shattered. I've run this boutique my whole life. My grandfather built it from nothing. It's our family name. Please don't destroy it over a misunderstanding. Jae-hyun did not step forward. He did not raise his voice. You didn't make a mistake, he said calmly. Harrington looked up, eyes desperate. You revealed who you are. The words were steady. Not cruel. Not loud. Certain. Ava stood a few feet away, watching. Her heartbeat was steady but heavy. She had never seen a man of Harrington's status kneel before anyone. She had never seen power flip so quickly. It unsettled her. Jae-hyun turned slightly toward her. Choose one, he said. Ava blinked. What? Choose any piece you want from the vault, he replied. The rest will go to the smelter. Harrington inhaled sharply, horror crossing his face. The smelter, he whispered. Yes, Jae-hyun said evenly. Melted down. Repurposed. Erased. The air tightened again. Ava looked toward the open vault in the back. Shelves of gold. Diamonds. History. Wealth. Generations of collection. Destroyed. It would be complete ruin. She felt a strange pull in her chest. A part of her, the wounded part, understood the appeal. The humiliation she had swallowed for years felt close to being avenged in one dramatic stroke. But something deeper spoke louder. Jae-hyun, she said softly. He looked at her immediately. She stepped closer and placed her hand lightly on his arm. I don't need you to destroy him. The words were calm. Harrington stared up at her in disbelief. Jae-hyun's jaw tightened slightly. He humiliated you. I know, she said. And I felt it. She took a breath, steadying herself. But I don't need destruction to prove my worth. Jae-hyun watched her closely. I need you to see me, she continued. Not as someone who needs revenge. Not as someone fragile. I am strong enough to stand here without watching someone else burn. Her voice did not shake. I don't want my power to come from someone else's collapse. Harrington's breathing slowed slightly, though he remained kneeling. Ava lifted her chin. My mother taught me something when I was young, she said quietly. Dignity is not about winning loudly. It's about standing tall when someone tries to shrink you. She looked at Jae-hyun fully now. I came here to buy gold. I didn't come here to destroy a man. The room seemed to pause around her. This was the pivot. Jae-hyun studied her face the way he studied contracts and decisions that carried weight. He searched for doubt, for weakness. He found none. He saw strength. Real strength. Not loud. Not dramatic. Grounded. His shoulders, which had been rigid since the moment she told him what was said, slowly relaxed. The tension in his posture eased by degrees. The tiger and dragon inked along his neck seemed less coiled. He exhaled quietly. You're right, he said at last. The words carried no hesitation. No resistance. Only acceptance. The direction of the moment shifted. And with that shift, the decision changed. The room felt different now. The anger that had filled it moments earlier had cooled into something steadier. More focused. Jae-hyun turned his attention back to Charles Harrington IV, who was still kneeling on the marble floor. Stand up, he said calmly. Harrington struggled to his feet, his movements unsteady, his pride clearly fractured. Jae-hyun did not look at him with fury anymore. He looked at him with clarity. I am still purchasing everything in the vault, he said. Harrington's breath caught again. But nothing will be melted, Jae-hyun continued. Ava remained quiet beside him, watching carefully. The entire inventory will be donated to a charity auction. Harrington blinked, confused. A charity, Jae-hyun repeated evenly. Specifically for young black women in leadership programs. The words landed heavily in the boutique. In Ava Reynolds' name. Ava looked at him, surprised, but he did not look back. His focus remained on Harrington. The auction will fund scholarships, mentorship programs, and business grants. The gold will not be erased. It will be repurposed into opportunity. Harrington's lips parted, but no sound came out. Jae-hyun slid the Black American Express Centurion card toward him across the counter. Process the transaction. Harrington moved slowly, almost mechanically. His hands still trembled as he lifted the card and inserted it into the terminal. The screen lit up. $4,200,000. The numbers were enormous. Cold. Final. Jae-hyun took the receipt when it printed and signed it without hesitation. The pen moved smoothly across the paper, as if he were signing something ordinary. He handed the receipt back. That concludes the inventory. Harrington nodded weakly. And the building, Jae-hyun continued. Harrington looked up sharply. I am purchasing it as well. The statement was not dramatic. It was factual. The transfer documents will be delivered shortly. You will cooperate with my legal team. Harrington swallowed hard. What do you plan to do with it? Jae-hyun glanced around the boutique. The marble floors, the velvet displays, the quiet history that had once been a symbol of exclusion. It will be renovated, he said. He paused briefly. Possibly an art gallery, or a community center. He let the idea settle in the room. A space where talent is supported instead of judged. Ava felt something shift inside her chest again. Not anger, not humiliation. Something steadier. Purpose. Harrington's shoulders sagged. 90 years of legacy had changed direction in a single afternoon. Jae-hyun walked toward the door, then stopped. He turned once more toward Harrington, who stood behind the counter that no longer felt like a throne. Oh, Mr. Harrington, Jae-hyun said quietly. Harrington lifted his eyes. Gold looks magnificent on her. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They cut deeper than any raised voice. Harrington lowered his gaze, unable to respond. The transaction was complete. The receipt was signed. The card was returned. The decision had been made. The boutique, once a place of quiet judgment, now stood on the edge of transformation. And the moment was sealed. The boutique door closed behind them with a quiet click. They stepped onto Fifth Avenue. The afternoon sun stretched across the polished sidewalks, casting long golden reflections against the tall glass windows. The city moved as it always did, cars gliding past, pedestrians crossing, distant conversations blending into urban rhythm. The three men in black suits who had been standing guard outside gave a subtle nod. Without being told, they dispersed. One entered a waiting car. Another crossed the street. The third disappeared into the crowd as if he had never been there at all. The street returned to normal. But Ava felt different. She stood still for a moment beside Jae-hyun, the noise of the city filling the space between them. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Her voice carried no accusation, only reflection. Jae-hyun looked ahead, not at her. Yes, he replied evenly. I did. She tilted her head slightly. Why? He exhaled slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. Because the world needs consequences, he said. Not apologies that fade in a week. Not training seminars that change nothing. Real consequences. The wind brushed lightly against his suit jacket. For too long, he continued, people have hidden behind manners and titles while they decide who deserves respect. Ava listened without interrupting. His tone shifted slightly, not softer but heavier. My mother died in a hospital, he said. Ava's breath stilled. She was an immigrant. Her English wasn't perfect. She asked for help. They dismissed her symptoms. They spoke over her. They assumed she didn't understand. His jaw tightened. They treated her like she didn't matter. The traffic noise around them seemed distant now. By the time someone finally listened, he said, it was too late. Ava's chest tightened. It wasn't a dramatic mistake, he added. It was quiet, polite, dismissive. He turned to face her fully now. People like Harrington exist everywhere. Behind counters, behind desks, behind authority. Ava saw it then. This had not only been about gold, or a bracelet, or even humiliation. It had been about memory, about loss, about something deeper that had shaped him long before she walked into that boutique. She reached for his hand gently. It wasn't just about me, she said softly. He gave a small nod. No. They stood there in silence for a moment, the city moving around them. Then Jae-hyun's expression shifted slightly, lighter now. I know someone, he said. In the Little Seoul district. Ava looked up. Mr. Dong-hoon Lee, he continued. He has been crafting jewelry for over 40 years. There was respect in his voice. He doesn't ask what suits someone's skin. He asks what story they want to wear. Ava felt something warm settle inside her. He works with his hands, Jae-hyun added. Slowly, carefully. Every piece is personal. She smiled faintly. Custom. Yes, he replied. You design it. He brings it to life. The idea felt different from the polished cases they had just left behind. Not mass display. Not performance. Intention. I want something simple, Ava said after a moment. But meaningful. You'll have it, Jae-hyun said. They began walking down Fifth Avenue together, side by side. The sunlight reflected off the glass buildings around them, turning everything into soft gold. The street noise grew louder as they blended back into the rhythm of the city. No security. No spectacle. Just two figures moving forward. And together they walked away. 3 weeks later, Fifth Avenue looked different. The gold lettering that once read Harrington and Heirs had been removed. The windows were no longer filled with velvet-lined displays. Instead, scaffolding framed the entrance, and workers moved in steady rhythm behind protective barriers. The marble floors inside were being replaced. The interior walls had been stripped clean. Old fixtures were stacked outside, waiting to be taken away. The building was in the middle of transformation. A small crowd gathered across the street that afternoon. Curious onlookers paused, whispering quietly as a large white banner was lifted into place above the entrance. It unfurled slowly. Bold black letters stretched across it. Coming soon, Ava Reynolds Creative Institute. The name stood proudly against the sky. Below the banner, near the doorframe, a bronze plaque had been mounted carefully into the stone exterior. The engraving caught the sunlight, as if it had always belonged there. The words were simple. Beauty has no skin tone. Ava stood across the street, watching. She wore a soft cream coat and dark trousers. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. But on her wrist rested something unmistakable. The custom bracelet. Mr. Dong-hoon Lee had crafted it with quiet precision. The gold was pure, smooth, and warm against her skin. It did not overpower. It did not demand attention. It belonged there. Engraved delicately along the inner band were two versions of her name, Ava Reynolds, and beside it, in elegant Hangul characters, her name written again. She turned her wrist slightly as the sun lowered in the sky. The gold caught the light. It did not clash with her skin. It illuminated it. The warmth of the metal seemed to glow, reflecting soft amber tones against her deep brown complexion. She inhaled slowly. 3 weeks ago, she had walked into this building carrying 3 months of savings and a quiet determination to give someone she loved something meaningful. Now she stood here, watching that same building prepare to open its doors to young artists, creators, and leaders who would never be told they did not belong. The transformation felt unreal. Not because it had happened quickly, but because it had happened at all. She thought about Charles Harrington IV, about the man who once stood behind polished glass cases, confident in his authority. She wondered where he was now. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel revenge. She felt something calmer. Consequences had arrived not through chaos, but through redirection. She lifted her wrist again and traced the smooth edge of the bracelet with her thumb. The gold felt solid, permanent. She reflected on how easily humiliation could have shaped this story differently, how anger could have defined the outcome. Instead, something larger had taken root. Legacy, not destruction. Opportunity. The workers finished securing the banner and stepped back. The crowd murmured softly in approval before dispersing. The building, stripped and quiet, stood ready for its new purpose. Ava remained for a moment longer as the sun began to dip behind the skyline. The evening light painted Fifth Avenue in soft shades of amber and gold. She watched as the reflection of the sunset shimmered along the polished metal of her bracelet. Gold did not diminish her. It honored her. And as the sky deepened into warm color, she stood still, letting the final light of the day settle around her in silence. Months passed. The doors of the Ava Reynolds Creative Institute opened quietly one morning, without spectacle or red carpet. There were no velvet ropes, no guarded entrances. Instead, there was laughter. Young black girls stepped inside with backpacks slung over their shoulders and curiosity shining in their eyes. Some came holding sketchbooks. Others carried notebooks filled with ideas they had been too shy to share before. The building no longer felt exclusive. It felt alive. Classrooms filled with easels and canvases welcomed girls who loved color and texture. A leadership room upstairs held round tables where mentors spoke about confidence, public speaking, and business planning. A small recording studio allowed poets and storytellers to share their voices. Workshops taught financial literacy, creative design, and entrepreneurship. The walls displayed artwork created by the girls themselves. Paintings of bold faces, portraits in gold, abstract pieces filled with movement and light. No one questioned whether they belonged. No one redirected them to a smaller space. No one measured their worth against contrast. Ava stood near the entrance one afternoon, watching a group of girls walk in together. Their voices were bright. Their steps were confident. They did not hesitate at the doorway. She touched the bracelet on her wrist gently. The gold was warm against her skin. 3 months ago, she had stood in a different doorway, uncertain but determined. She had carried savings earned from late nights and skipped meals. She had walked into a space that measured her before listening to her. The memory felt distant now, but not erased. She remembered the way humiliation had tried to shrink her. She remembered compressing her anger into something silent. She remembered lifting her chin anyway. Now, as she watched the center fill with possibility, she understood the difference between borrowed power and rooted strength. Back then, she had wanted to prove she could afford beauty. Now, she saw that beauty was never about price. It was about permission. Permission to exist fully. Permission to wear gold. Permission to lead. The contrast between that moment and this one was clear. Then, she stood alone in tension. Now she stood surrounded by movement, creativity, and growth. A young girl approached her shyly, holding a sketchbook. "Ms. Reynolds," she said softly, "do you think this is good enough?" Ava smiled. "Is it yours?" she asked. The girl nodded. "Then it's already enough." The girl's smile widened, and she ran back toward the art room. Ava looked down at her bracelet once more. The engraved letters, English and Hangul, caught the light. 2 languages. 2 histories. 1 quiet reminder. Gold had never been the issue. Vision had been. Outside, the sun began to lower in the sky. Its light filtered through the tall windows of the center, casting a warm glow across the walls. The paintings shimmered softly. The polished floors reflected amber tones. The city beyond continued its steady rhythm. Inside, something different was growing. Dignity. Confidence. Legacy. Ava stepped outside as the sky deepened into shades of honey and fire. The golden light touched her skin and wrapped around her like affirmation. She no longer carried 3 months of savings. She carried something far greater. The knowledge that worth is not granted by gatekeepers. It is claimed. And as the sun settled fully beneath the horizon, bathing the street in its final golden breath, the light rested gently on her wrist. Gold shining. Unapologetic. Exactly where it belonged. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.